I traveled to a country I'd never heard of. Here's what happened.
What if the most unforgettable place on earth was a country you'd never even heard of? No viral TikToks, no massive tourist crowds, no famous landmarks printed on postcards, just a random name on a map, and a plane ticket I almost didn't buy. At first, I thought this would just be a quick little adventure. Instead, it completely changed the way I think about travel. It started late one night, while I was scrolling through flight deals online. You know that dangerous moment when you're just browsing, and suddenly, you're already imagining yourself packing a suitcase. That was me. And then I saw it. A tiny country I had never heard anyone talk about before. No travel influencers posting about it. No YouTube guides with millions of views. Not even that one friend who somehow claims they've been everywhere. Honestly, I wasn't even sure people actually traveled there, which somehow made it even more interesting. So, without thinking too hard about it, I booked the ticket. A few weeks later, I landed in a place I couldn't even pronounce properly. And the very first thing I noticed, the silence. Not actual silence, but the absence of chaos. No giant advertisements. No crowds rushing through the airport. No endless lines of tourists trying to take the same photo. Everything felt calm, almost untouched. Even outside the airport, the atmosphere felt different. The roads were quieter. The buildings looked unfamiliar. Every sign around me was written in a language I couldn't understand at all. And that's when it finally hit me. I was completely outside my comfort zone. And honestly, that's exactly what made it exciting. Most people travel already knowing what to expect. They've seen the Instagram reels, watched the travel vlogs, saved the TikToks. But this time, I had absolutely no idea what was waiting for me. And somehow, that mystery made every moment feel bigger. Even the taxi ride felt like part of the adventure. As we drove through the city, I couldn't stop staring out the window. Street markets filled with unfamiliar food. Tiny cafes packed with locals. Old buildings standing beside modern apartments. It felt like discovering a hidden level in a video game nobody talks about. And then came my first real challenge. Food. Because suddenly I realized something important. Nobody around me spoke English. Not the restaurant staff. Not the taxi driver. Not even the cashier at the convenience store. And somehow, I still had to survive. So there I was, standing in a tiny local restaurant, pointing randomly at menu items I couldn't read. Best decision ever. A few minutes later, a giant bowl of something steaming hot landed in front of me. To this day, I still don't fully know what it was, but it tasted incredible. And that pretty much became the theme of the entire trip. Every day felt unpredictable, and weirdly enough, that made travel exciting again. Somewhere along the way, travel had become too planned, too optimized.
People visit places already knowing where to stand for photos, which cafe to visit, what foods are TikTok famous. But here, nothing felt manufactured. I wasn't following trends. I was actually exploring. And that's when the trip became unforgettable. One morning, I wandered through a neighborhood market just after sunrise. Vendors were setting up fresh fruit, bread, spices, and handmade goods. Locals greeted each other like old friends. Kids ran between stalls laughing. And even though I understood almost none of the language, I somehow still felt welcome. Travel is strange like that. Sometimes you connect with people without saying much at all. A smile, a gesture, someone helping you when you're obviously lost. Those moments stay with you longer than famous landmarks ever do. Of course, not everything went smoothly. At one point, I got completely lost trying to find my hotel. My phone battery died. It started raining, and I had absolutely no clue where I was. For about 20 minutes, I genuinely thought I might end up sleeping on a random sidewalk. Then something happened I'll never forget. An older local man noticed I was struggling. He didn't speak English. I didn't speak his language. But somehow, he immediately understood the situation. He pulled out a paper map, an actual paper map, and spent nearly 15 minutes helping me figure out where I needed to go. Then he walked me halfway there in the rain just to make sure I didn't get lost again. Before leaving, he smiled, nodded once, and disappeared back into the crowd. That moment stayed with me. because when people talk about travel, they usually focus on places, the beaches, the mountains, the famous buildings. But the thing you remember most, people, always people. And the more time I spent in this country, the more I realized something surprising. This place didn't need giant tourist attractions to feel special. It felt special because it was real. Nothing was designed for visitors. People were simply living their normal lives. And somehow, that authenticity made every experience feel more meaningful. Even the simplest moments became memorable. Drinking coffee in a quiet square, watching locals play music at night, riding crowded buses through neighborhoods tourists never visit. It felt less like sightseeing and more like temporarily living someone else's life. Then came one of the craziest moments of the trip. I accidentally got invited to a local celebration. To this day, I still have no idea what the event was actually for. But suddenly I was sitting with families I had never met, eating homemade food, watching traditional dancing, and attempting very badly to join in. Apparently, my dancing was so terrible that even the grandparents were laughing. Honestly, that made it even better. That night taught me something important. The best travel experiences usually aren't planned.
They happen when you stop trying to control everything. When you say yes more often. When you stay curious. When you allow yourself to get a little lost. And this country constantly rewarded curiosity. Every alley seemed to hide something interesting. A hidden bakery, a rooftop cafe, a tiny bookstore, a family-owned restaurant with recipes older than most countries. There was no pressure to check off famous attractions. I could just wander. And for the first time in years, travel felt genuinely spontaneous again. But eventually, the trip started coming to an end. And strangely, I didn't want to leave. Not because the country was perfect. It wasn't. There were awkward moments, language barriers, transportation mistakes. At one point, I may or may not have boarded the wrong train completely. Twice. But somehow, those imperfections made the experience even more meaningful. Because perfect trips are forgettable. Unexpected moments become stories. And this trip gave me plenty of those. By the final day, the country that once felt completely unfamiliar now felt strangely comfortable. The streets no longer seemed confusing. The food felt familiar. Even the sounds of the city started to feel normal. And that's when I realized something. The places we know nothing about often end up teaching us the most. Not because they're famous, but because they force us to pay attention. To observe. To adapt. To connect. Traveling somewhere completely unfamiliar reminded me why people travel in the first place. Not just to see new places, but to become slightly different versions of ourselves. And honestly, some of the world's most incredible destinations are the ones nobody talks about. The hidden places. The overlooked places. The countries people scroll past without noticing. Sometimes those are the journeys that stay with you forever. So if you ever get the chance to visit a place you've never heard of, take it. Book the ticket. Embrace the uncertainty. Get a little lost. You never know what kind of story is waiting for you there. And who knows? Your favorite place in the world might currently just be a random name on a map you've never noticed before. So, what's the most unexpected place you've ever traveled to? Tell us in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for more adventures from places you'd never expect.